right, so good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And in case you haven't attended one of our events before, I'm Angelina Lippert, the Chief Curator of Poster House, the first and only museum in the United States dedicated to the art and history of the poster. Tonight, I am joined by my friend and fellow curator, Jodi Shapiro. Jodi is the Associate Curator at the New York Transit Museum and has curated a bunch of incredible shows over the years. Now, I first met Jodi in person, though, at one of the Transit Museum's special tours of the old City Hall subway station. And while I obviously love Poster House dearly, I always say that out of every museum in the city, the Transit Museum gives you the best perks. I have toured train yards, gone behind the scenes at the place where they print all the signage for the subway, and I've gone underground to where the power station is in Midtown, where they have let me shut off a portion of the 6 train for a hot minute. So if you were delayed on a Sunday morning a few years ago, that could have been me. Anyway, check out the Transit Museum if you haven't already, because you will most likely hang out with me on one of their in-person tours once they reconvene. Now tonight, we will be talking about Oppy, the Emily Post of the subway, a subject that Jodi knows quite well. Now, if you have a question during her talk, please drop them in the chat or the Q&A tab. I'll be monitoring both. And I will vocalize all of her questions as they come up. So we're casual and friendly here, so ask anything. And closed captioning is always available in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And with that, Jodi, tell us all about Oppy.
Time to share my screen. Here we go. All right. So Oppy, the Emily Post of the subway. So her real name is Amelia Opdyke Jones. She created several decades worth of instructional posters indicating how one should behave while riding the nation's finest transit system. Full of humor, wit, and valuable information, these posters still bring delight to the viewers today and are a treasured part of the Transit Museum's permanent collection. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Transit Museum if you do not know who we are. We opened in 1976 as part of the bicentennial of New York City as the New York Transit Exhibition. We became the New York Transit Museum in the 1980s. We are located in a decommissioned IND, that's Independent subway station in downtown Brooklyn. We have a gallery and shop in Grand Central Terminal. We have programs for all ages. We used to serve over 500,000 visitors a year when we were open to the public before the pandemic. Hopefully after the pandemic after the situation has improved and we're allowed to open up again, we'll serve more than that a year. That's all I have to say about that. Let's just start with the beginnings of the poster series that Oppy did her work for. So there were twin poster series, the Subway Sun and the Elevated Express. Here on your screen, there is a drawing for one of the Elevated Express posters, which has this great bird's eye view of people sitting in subway cars with the gates. Both of these started in 1918, and at first the posters were used to promote the benefits and conveniences of the IRT system, which is Interborough Rapid Transit. They were the first subway line. They announced schedules, fares, safety information, and to publicize scenic and cultural attractions that were along the routes that they took. In the mid-1930s, a gentleman named Frederick G. Cooper, he lived from 1883 to 1961. He took over the job as principal artist and designer for both of these series. He was a renowned illustrator and a graphic designer. He had served as a staff artist and the cartoon editor of the original Life humor magazine. And he created amusing subway and elevated car cards in this distinctive style, of which we're not showing him today because we're going to talk about Oppy. But this is another typical Subway Sun from the 1930s. Very informational, text-based information. The Subway Sun was continued by the city even after it purchased the Interborough Rapid Transit system in 1940. But in the following year, it was eliminated because of budgetary constraints due to World War II. So this is a pretty boring informational poster. When you see photos of the subway around this time, you've got lots of text-based ads like this telling you what you can expect to see at 1:30 p.m. on Sunday, September 17th, and how to get there. And that changes late in Fred's tenure. And when the Subway Sun was revived and expanded in 1946, Cooper didn't want to do it anymore. He was too busy. So he suggested his friend and colleague Amelia to take over for him. And she's Amelia Opdyke Jones. She lived from 1913 to 1993. She's also known as Oppy, and she crafted the campaign until the mid-1960s. And I say that she crafted because she not only came up with the content for the posters, but she also illustrated them. And here she is, proudly showing off one of her works to a train operator. And this is a photo from 1956. It was on the cover of a magazine called Transit, which was the in-house organ for the Board of Transportation. Here's another cover of Transit magazine. She signed her early work, Opdyke. She created a single frame daily cartoon called The Young Idea for United Feature Syndicate. It ran from 1932 to 1935, and it had kids in it that had large heads, just kind of like Peanuts. But she was pre-Peanuts. Did Scholes see her work and get inspired by it? I'm not sure. She was born Amelia Ross Opdyke, and she was a descendant of New York Civil War era Mayor George Opdyke. She began drawing at an early age because she was housebound from asthma a lot as a child. So she entertained herself by sketching endlessly while she was in bed. She went to high school in Orange, New Jersey. She studied for a couple of months at the Art Students League, and then she entered the New York workforce as a novice commercial artist around 1930. And she was really young. Following a really unsuccessful stint in fashion illustration, she began cartooning spot drawings for Fred at Life. And Cooper really took a shine to Amelia, and he purchased a lot of her work for the magazine and became her mentor as a cartoonist and a commercial artist. So these are two quotes that I feel say a lot about what you're about to see from Oppy. 12 to 14 words are all I put on a poster, something they can get in the glance. That's what she said in 1946 in the Brooklyn Eagle. And in 1948, an article about her in the New York Times said that she created gems of subterranean subtlety. So she commuted to the city 2 or 3 days a week because Oppy worked mostly at home and sometimes out of Cooper's studio on West Street. And there were 2 posters a month at this point. Initially, there were about 8,000 copies of each Subway Sun that were printed and posted. By the mid-1950s, poster runs increased to 12,000 copies, but the number of yearly issues were reduced to about 15. So it's kind of hard to say exactly how many posters she did over the course of her run at the Subway Sun, but that means that there's a heck of a lot of eyes on these posters. So she had a fantastic platform to inform and amuse transit riders. The New York Times also called her the subway's surrealist. And this is a quote from that article, and I'm going to read it close to get it right. Thrown in without cost to patrons who pay their dimes for a ride in New York subways is an exhibition of art. It is modern in style, but has an old-fashioned Victorian quality about it too, because it teaches a lesson and tells a moral tale. It consists of those car cards which subway authorities put up to cajole riders into good underground manners. An estimated 5,410,000 people a day have access to it. And that's an incredible reach for any kind of ad campaign. Wouldn't you say, Angelina, that's sort of unprecedented for an informational campaign?
Totally, actually, like totally spot on.
Sorry, I put you on the spot there.
No, I'm like,
I'm going to start at the thing that Oppy is probably best known for, even though many people don't know that she is the person who is responsible, and that is the word litterbug. She's credited with originating the term litterbug, and from that same article in the New York Times, a tract for trash tossers bore the legend, "Nobody loves a litterbug," and introduced that pudgy little master of subway faux pas, who was supposed to typify the untidy passenger. The public laughed at him, but would they find moral in Ms. Jones's art? Recently, the Board of Transportation looked back on the results of its poster campaign. In previous years, transit police gave summonses to 10,000 passengers a month for violations of the sanitary code. Now the culprits number only 8,000. So that's a pretty effective.
Wait, can
And
you still get like a summons for littering on the subway? Because I have questions.
Theoretically, yes, you can. I don't know how often those summonses are issued. That's a question for the MTA press office. But it is in the code of conduct that there is a fine for littering.
Oh,
So this is a 1948, 47 version of her litterbug poster. And I think this is the first of those. And I'm going to scroll quick to another litterbug. I love the shocked look on this woman's face. She's so shocked that this gentleman would drop this trash on the floor of a subway car, and here comes the conductor to tell him what's what. And I just love everything about this. The color is really grabby. Red is always attention getting. The type that she's used, that she's drawn, is very thick and heavy, and it's a simple message: look out, litterbug, because the Board of Transportation is coming for you. I'm going to be showing a lot of posters tonight, so I'm going to try to spend as much time on them that you can see what's so great about them, but not take up too much time because I want you to see them all. Here is another part of that campaign, quarantine the gum bug. And while litterbug is still in use today, gum bug didn't stick, which is kind of sad because I really like it. You know, litterbug and gum bug, there is a distinction between litter and gum. Gum is extra messy. But one of the things that I do want to point out about this is a really good example of Opdyke's technique in drawing. There's only 5 lines for this gentleman's expression. There's this one here, which is his eyebrow, this dot for the eye, the shape of the eye, the furrow in his face, and his disdainful frown. So with 5 lines, she's captured this disdain, anger, and disgust. She referred to this particular technique as the completely anonymous face. It shows emotion, but doesn't insult the viewer. It's lighthearted enough to amuse, but not so funny as to dilute the seriousness of her message. And you'll see this throughout the slides tonight, that she employs this technique to great effect. In 1955, she was called the Emily Post of the subway. Here's Litterbug again, as it's featured on another poster. She had a variety of favorite subjects, so the rest of the slides I'm going to show you are organized loosely by theme. And the first is civic pride through clean city streets and not being wasteful. So here is the first of those, Spring Clean Your City. It's from 1947. And this gentleman here off to the left may look a little bit familiar to some of you and unfamiliar to others. He's Father Nick, short for Father Knickerbocker. Oppy uses him very frequently, especially in her early work from the 40s and 50s. Father Nick is a shorthand way of encompassing the history of old New York, of which Opdyke was a direct descendant. So there's an extra emotional response for her there. He's derived from Diedrich Knickerbocker, the fictional historian who was dreamed up by Washington Irving in his satirical novel, A History of New York from the Beginning of the World to the End of the Dutch Dynasty by Diedrich Knickerbocker. But the Knickerbockers were a real family of Dutch descent who lived in upstate New York. So it wasn't just this fictional thing. You know, scholars believe that Diedrich Knickerbocker was based on his friend who was one of the Knickerbockers. And I like how it's, you know, all the boroughs are listed here. Please cooperate.
Also with how Richmond, that's Staten Island, right?
Yes, it is. Still calling it Richmond. And you see the mayor, William O'Dwyer here, and there's some marginalia, which is super cool. This is one of the pieces in our collection that is a gouache painting. Gouache is this type of watercolor. So you're going to see a difference between things from our collection that are original paintings and things that I'm showing you that as their finished form as a Subway Sun card. So here is Father Nick again, sans hat. This is another Civic Pride from 1947. The colors are the New York State and New York City colors. New York City colors, sorry, New York State is yellow, but New York City is orange and blue. That's why our sports teams are blue and orange, including my beloved Islanders, who we're going to play later tonight. Sorry, I had to get that in. My mom is probably rolling her eyes. Stop waste, save water. In 1948, there was a real concern about wasting water and dripping faucets. And I love the, shocked looks of kids and parents alike with these very simple lines executed in a very clear way. Aim for a clean city. Some different kinds of garbage. Here's a later subway sun. This is post 1953 because one thing you will notice, I'm going to scroll back to the other slide. It says here, Board of Transportation. And in this slide, it says New York City Transit Authority. That's because in 1953, the Board of Transportation was abolished and became the New York City Transit Authority. That's what it's called today. They have control over the subways and most buses. And here's Father Nick again, telling you to take care of your train because it's yours. And technically he's correct. This is the next group of subjects. There's fewer of these than the others. Straight up public service announcements, which are a natural subject for posters that are going to be in the subway because you've got hundreds of thousands of pairs of eyes who could potentially volunteer for service, people who could take exams for, in this case, fire, police, air raid warden. Wake up, serve your city. And so, I don't know the numbers of how effective these particular civil defense campaigns were, but I would imagine they were more successful than they would have been had they not been advertised in the subway. And here's that pesky Father Nick again, telling you to listen to the mayor's weekly address on WPIX channel 11, and still WPIX 11 today. Huh. Yeah. I used to remember what the call letters for PIX meant, and they just completely left my head right now. Someone in the chat might know. And if they do, please remind me. I like this a lot because this is a commemoration of Pennsy, the Pennsylvania Railroad. The Pennsylvania Railroad is one of the predecessor agencies of today's MTA. There are some of the Long Island Railroad trackage and routes were built by Penn Central because Penn Central owned them at one point. And so when this poster was issued in 1946, it was the 100th anniversary of Penn Central. So that is Father Nick. And see, here it is helpful in his hat saying Father Nick, because at this point, maybe in the 40s, people might not be as familiar with him as they would have been maybe 20 years prior to that. And here is a friendly engineer from the Pennsylvania Railroad saying hi to Father Nick. It looks like he's going to collide with him, actually, which is a little scary.
We actually have a question in the chat that's kind of interesting. What was the split between general city or civic announcements and transit-related announcements? And did they change when the NYCTA took over control from a city department?
That's a really good question. As of yet, at the museum, we're not exactly sure what the split was. We're in the process of kind of figuring it all out now because we got something in a acquisition fairly recently that's sort of like the Rosetta Stone for all this, where it's got the press runs of the posters and the, how long they were up in the cars and which cars they went in, which routes they were on. So we're just starting to pour over that right now. I would imagine just from what we have in our collection, which is not complete, but fairly comprehensive, that it's maybe a third are general city public service announcements, for service, for events that are happening in parks and things like that. And the rest are equally divided amongst service. That means like improvements to service, like termination of service, politeness, behavior, and then things like this, which are health and safety, which is a huge Oppy favorite. So stay tuned. At some point in the future, we'll have a much better idea. But it looks to be about split in thirds, because the subway is a city and state agency now, but back then, at this point in time in the 40s, it was still a city agency.
And someone in the chat says that the Pix is for New York's picture newspaper.
That makes sense because Daily News, Tribune, and WPIX is part of the Tribune broadcasting system. Wow, that's something I just pulled out of my newspaper days from like 30 years ago, which is, see, the connections, they never go away.
It always comes full circle.
Always come back. I love this piece so much. So much, in fact, that when Angelina was doing her talk on PSAs, I said to her, would you like to have a piece from Oppy about venereal disease?
She knows me so well.
Well, not to cast any aspersions on your taste. It's just venereal disease is something that's really funny. I find it hilarious that it was advertised in the subway as a real public health crisis. Which it was, but during wartime, there's a lot of ads that are seen in subway cars that are talking about venereal disease as being just as deadly as foreign invaders, and I find it hilarious. So here's Father Nick. He's Dr. Nick here at the Department of Health, telling you what to do if you suspect you might have venereal disease. Tells you what to do to find out. I also love the old phone numbers, Worth 26900, and explaining to you, if you don't know what VD means venereal disease. Let's not talk about venereal disease, but talk more about other hazards that might befall you in the subway, like falling down. This in particular is a bus subway ad, a bus subway sun. They called it the Surface Express, I believe. She's tripping over the bus step with these very, very high stiletto heels. You're going to see some more bus ads as we scroll through the presentation. And some of my favorites are the ones for coughs and sneezes. Catch your cold before it gets out of your hand. Very relevant for today. So we have this one from 1954, and it's got a very beleaguered person sneezing on the left-hand side. This is my favorite out of all the cough and cold ones, I think. Please cover that cough, cover that sneeze. And this is from 1958. So you can see that things like this were a constant throughout the whole Subway Sun campaign, even from its inception. Another one that I love is, if you expectorate, please don't expectorate. And throughout every etiquette campaign that has ever been placed in the subway, in the bus, in commuter rail, spitting is the one thing that will always remain a problem, to everyone's consternation. People love to spit in the subway. I don't know why. It's totally disgusting. It spreads disease. People do it anyway. And you can see that these people are appropriately disgusted by this gentleman who's dressed like a dandy. I love what he's wearing. We're not sure of the date on this one. The marginalia says 1949, but the way that we catalog these in the collection is until we find the example of the finished card, we don't date it, because sometimes she did things early and they didn't show up until the next year. So this is a clue that it could be 49, but we're not 100% sure yet, but we will be soon. And here's kind of a catch-all: obey the law, avoid summons. Again, summons are issued for smoking, littering, spitting, and other violations of health and sanitary codes. And they're for your protection. Besides disease, there were Subway Sun posters that were sponsored by the Department of Health to encourage people to eat well, to go outside, to go to parks and take walks, to just try to choose your food carefully because they pay dividends in health and vigor, according to this up here. And here's Father Nick again, who's, watching what you're eating while you watch what you eat. And that kind of leads us into another subject that Oppy was very fond of, being a tourist in your own city, which is a lot easier if you know how to get there by subway or by bus. This is great. Enjoy famous expositions at the Kingsbridge Armory, which is in the Bronx. And you can see by the little signifiers for the IRT, for Interborough Rapid Transit, and IND, the Independent Subway, which is the city-owned and operated lines. Both those systems went up to Kingsbridge. So there's a lot of subliminal stuff going on in these where you see it at a glance. Here's Father Nick again. I love the crowd also. Her crowd work is fantastic. With just a couple of lines here and there, you can see that every person, I'm pointing at the screen like you could see me pointing at the screen, but I'll circle some people. Every individual person, they're all fully formed with these simple lines and expressions. That's pretty hard to do. She was a master of that technique. Here's another real famous one that we use at the museum quite a bit. Go subway to the Rockaway Amusements. Take the INDA train. Take it easy. And that's another theme of her posters of this time period of the 50s, that the subway is easy. It's easy to go wherever you want. Just take the correct train. I love the colors on this as well. Just simple yellow and blue. And another one of my favorites, Coney Island, not to be left out. Oppy did lots of advertisements to encourage people to go to Coney Island. And you could see you could get there by the BMT Coney Island trains or the IND train. You've got the parachute jump here. You've got people presumably on a date. These are definitely on a date, either that or they're very scared, but I don't think so because he's smiling. So I think they're just, embracing each other because it's romantic to plummet 50 feet to the ground or however tall. How tall is the parachute jump? Do you remember? It's more than 50 feet. I can't do it. It terrifies me.
Somebody said 200 to 250 feet in the chat.
Okay, yeah, so I don't know why they're happy because I would be screaming. I can't even do the Wonder Wheel. It makes me too nervous.
Oh, the Wonder Wheel's great.
It's great. It's just, once was enough for me. The Cloisters, however, is someplace that I go a lot. And the INDA train to 190th Street. So, this is another aspect of the Subway Sun campaigns to encourage people to explore their city. It only costs you a nickel or a dime at this point. Actually, it's 58, so it's probably 15 cents at this point.
I like looking at this one because the other ones we've seen by her can be very like cartoony, almost in the style of the comic books, whereas this one is very like staid and quiet and very different style. It's
a departure for her. There are some other examples of her earlier work where she does do this pretty much straight ahead, destination type of drawing. But I get the impression from even by looking at it that I think she had more fun drawing the people doing bad things. This is beautiful, and the Cloisters, of course, is beautiful, but Go Subway on a Token Tour. That was part of this series, was the token tours, like one token, and you could go see these great attractions. I think these are beautiful and wonderful, but I really believe she had fun doing stuff like this. These are the posters that she's most well known for. It's her posters about etiquette. These are what earned her Emily Post of the Subway. And, what better way to start this section with win respect by being respectful. And here it is. It's a gentleman, it's a lady, and here's an older lady. I love the hat pin. I guess in the 40s, the hat pin signifies that you're of a certain age. I don't know. Politeness promotes popularity. A lot of her posters have alliteration in them, which is a fantastic device to get people to pay attention to your message. Here is a gentleman ushering in a lady and her child. Here's another older lady with the two-handed purse hold, which is also a stereotype of older ladies of the time, of the 40s. Hats, hats, hats. Everyone's got a hat. Love the hats.
We do have a question about that Coney Island image from a while ago. Why is the BMT highlighted in red and large compared to the IND in white and smaller?
This is a mystery to me. I don't know why. I think perhaps because she liked the BMT better, maybe. It could be that the IND service was not a weekday service and just a weekend service at the time. That's something I would have to actually look up, like in the big book of service changes. But you know, maybe she just liked the BMT better. I wish we could ask her. There's lots of questions like I wish I could ask her. And when we get to one of the posters later on, I will tell you what I would want to ask her about that.
Oh, we also have two other questions. How long did it take her to create each poster? And are there any published books containing her work?
I don't know for sure if there are any books that contain just her work, like a monograph. I know that her work is reproduced in, I believe in Paul Shaw's book. I think he reproduced a couple of Subway Sons in there. There's definitely some in some Subway advertising books. As far as a monograph, I'm not sure. There have been some academic papers written about her that mostly talk about her being a woman in a very male-dominated field, which I'm going to talk about in a couple of slides. What was the other question? Sorry, how long did it take her to create these? She turned them around pretty quickly. From the notes that we have in this collection and some of her own accounts that are written in newspaper articles of the time, she would come up with an idea like on a Monday and it would be done by the next Monday, sometimes by that Friday. She turned these out pretty quickly, and she turned out more than they ended up using. So we have some things in the archives that we're not sure if they were ever used for a Subway Son. Sometimes things got rejected because either she didn't like the finished product or the way that they were going to print them didn't meet her standards. She was very exacting. She wanted things to look the way she wanted them to look. The colors of these gouache paintings, of which this slide is one, the color that she painted, that's the color she wanted the poster to be. So, you know, at this point in time, this is one, this doesn't have a date, but I would guess that this is from the mid 40s. This is a time when they're trying to economize on printing costs. So it's all going to be one color. And we've seen some of those finished cards earlier, like the Litterbug, the Lookout Litterbug one is all one color so that they could print them quickly and inexpensively. You know, printing was a big cost for these because they made so many of them. We spent a lot of time on this slide. I didn't even get to talk about it, which is teaching people how to properly enter the subway by having change in your hand and feeding it into the turnstile, or loading into the train single file through the proper door. This particular subway car that's depicted here had a door that you entered through and a door that you exited through. And we have those in the Transit Museum that you can visit when we are open to the public once again. As I said before, Oppy's work also appeared on surface lines, first trolleys and then buses. This is one of them. Excuse me. Little lap sitters give grown-ups rightful room, which is basically like, hey, if you have a kid, put them on your lap so that somebody else can sit next to you on the bus. There's a subway version of this as well. You know, I think this is, I should add that some of the children that are depicted in these posters are Oppy's versions of her own children. She had a son and a daughter. I don't know if this is her daughter, but it could be. But if you've noticed that the kids sometimes look like the same kids over and over again, that's because they're probably her children. I love this one. There's so much weird subtext going on in this. Don't cross your legs, because standees can't cross theirs. If you cross your legs, you're taking up a lot of room on the subway. But this guy, he looks like a masher. But she looks like she's kind of encouraging him to be a masher. Lots of weirdness here. And the appropriate proper elder lady is looking on in shock. Again, with these wonderful, simple lines, but so expressive. Here's another one. Don't hold the door, Richard. That slows service. I love how angry this guy is. He's reading a newspaper in the proper way because he's not spreading it out. There was an article in the New York Times in 1948 that I quoted before. And here's another quote. The spirit of reform aroused by Oppy's posters has spread in other directions too. Some writers who formerly would block doors, hog seats, or read papers in crowded cars no longer dare. Many more must follow their example, of course, before the subways become utopia, but the Board of Transportation is definitely encouraged. So much so that the placard campaign is to be extended. So these were such a big hit that they decided to keep making them, which I find funny because slightly earlier in 1946, even though this poster is not from 1946, it's from a decade later. In 1946, there was an article in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle entitled, "Women Artist Picks on Men, Women Can't Take Criticism." And the writer, Margaret Mara, revealed to her readers that it was a distinct surprise to this inquiring reporter to discover that Oppy is a woman. Later in the article, she writes, according to Oppy cartoons, men are the only offenders where subway etiquette is involved. Invariably, she depicts a man hogging a seat, spreading his wide open newspaper across the faces of seat neighbors, or tripping up a frail woman. Oppy explained, I know it looks bad for men. They are not the only offenders, but women can't take criticism. Now, I find that hilarious coming from Oppy because, you know, she was a woman who could take criticism, obviously. This particular poster, even though this was produced a decade after that quote, inspired several angry letters to the transit authority saying that women should not be encouraged to physically accost men who are in their way. And at that point, not everybody realized that Oppy was a woman, even though she had been outed as one a decade earlier. And they were pleased to, you know, tell the artist not to encourage women to hit his brothers, you know. So I love it. Everyone loves this. Not everyone, but lots of people love this. We've made it into magnets. I would love for it to be a t-shirt at some point because I would wear it every day.
Also, just the chat was blowing up on the last poster about the "Don't Hold the Door, Richard." It is a reference to the song "Open the Door, Richard."
Yeah,
just like "Open the door, Richard."
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. So that's very much of its time. You know, like if you know, most people, if this appeared today, they wouldn't remember that song because that was a song that was contemporary in the 40s. So, yeah, open the door, Richard. Now it's in my head. So Oppy said that, you know, men are the offenders in her work because women can't take criticism. But here we have a bus subway son, and here the woman is the perpetrator of the wrong. She is sitting sideways and she's stealing space. So Oppy kind of had a reversal at some point. And so here I was talking about color. Please print this color. So you can see here, you know, she was very specific about what she wanted the posters to look like. Take the easy way out, exit at the rear. Another here, please print this color, which is a blue. I love the little motion lines and stars here. But this gentleman is very happy. There is no pain for him because he's exiting at the rear instead of going through the front of the bus, which is a no-no. Here's another one. Please ease the squeeze. And here's the operator, much beleaguered. I'm sure he had to tap the sign quite a bit. No talking to the bus driver while the bus is in motion. And please don't crowd the door. Also, hats.
All the hats.
All the hats.
Somebody asked if Oppy had a system of what colors she liked to use or if there was any direction there.
I think it was just her personal preference, and it was probably informed by what they had available at the time. Maybe the Transit Authority got a deal at some supply house for a certain color of ink, and then there's a whole series of posters in the 50s where they're all orange and blue. They're all New York City colors. Is it because they got those colors at a discount? Is it because they bought too much of it for other projects and they had enough to do the runs? It's unclear. I kind of wish that we had the inventory sheets from the printing, because the Transit Authority used to do their own printing. I wish we had that. Nowadays we would, because it would all be computer generated. There must be a ledger out there somewhere. Maybe it's in somebody's basement and they just don't know it. I'd love to know that question, because I think the posters that she does that are the reds and the blues, to me, are the most effective ones of the single color ones. I do personally like the purple ones too, but those are not as grabby as the blues and the reds.
But that fact that you mentioned about using the posters, rather using the colors that you had available, that spans most of poster history. That a lot of utilitarian advertising was just like, what inks do we have? Guess that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and also, in the 40s, this is wartime, post-war, and so there's lots of reasons for cost cutting. The Transit Authority itself painting the subway cars, there were certain colors that subway cars were painted because that was the paint that they had and the paint that they were able to keep getting on a consistent basis and have all the colors be exact. So perhaps that same logic applied to the colors of the posters. Speaking of colors, that's a nice little segue into some of her later, we're getting into the later part of her career at the Subway Sun. A no smoking sign. This is a 3-color because the color of the paper, and then you've got the black and you've got the red. And you can see that there's the printing techniques are getting a little bit more sophisticated here. And here again, penalty, fine, jail, or both for smoking anywhere on transit property. And that was a rule that was in effect from the very beginning, the very opening of the subway in 1904. You were never allowed to smoke in the subway. People, there's sometimes movies where you see people smoking on subway platforms, and that always bugs me because that was against the rules and against the law. Here's another later 1950s, which is got now you've got tints. So another different printing technique. So you've got this nice magenta color, but you also have it at, you also have a shade of it. So this is, the printing is becoming more sophisticated. She's using more color. She's using more blocks of color, which is changing the way that she's making her art and changing the effectiveness of these posters. This is so much more grabby color-wise than some of the other ones. And this guy, he reminds me of Humpty Dumpty. He's even got the boater hat. So much more comfort if you take the local. I do feel that this one is a little bit of fat shaming also. Not politically correct today, but perfectly acceptable in 1958 to make fun of jolly, oversized men and lithe, slim women. So with the advancements in printing technology, these are some 1960s examples of Oppy's work. I love this. I've used it in a couple of exhibits. It's a promotion to encourage people to buy tokens as gifts and give them to people. And they are the good all around cheap no-brainer gift for people who live in New York, you know, even though it's thoughtful. Like if it was Valentine's Day, I don't think I would be very happy if my sweetheart gave me a token. Seems a little bit of a cop-out.
But it's a token of his affection.
Yeah, it is, but it's also cheap, you know. It's it's 20 cents. Yeah. Couldn't you have spent a whole quarter? You know, get well. I don't know. But the thing that I love, besides my issues with the occasions, one of the things I really do love about this is how all the O's are tokens. They're used as buttons, as a ring, as a monocle, as Cleopatra's jewelry. I just love it. This probably took a lot of time to execute. And I love PS, sorry, no containers or packages available. This was pre 10 packs, way before the 10 pack. This one is a full-size poster that was posted on the walls of stations. And the next two slides, I've split it into two parts because I really want you to see the little devils that Oppy has put into these. You've got all the rules of the subway, things that you're not supposed to do, that you will get fined $25 if you do them, and or 10 days in jail. Some of them are pretty explanatory, you know, no littering, no smoking, no explosives, okay. No messing up, wrecking, or swiping TA stuff. So I definitely would have gotten a $25 fine and or 10 days of jail had I lived in 1962, because that's how I got some of my subway signs. That was pre-working at the Transit Museum. And when I started working there, I did confess that I had some because I felt guilty. No liquor, okay. No peddling, no signs or handbills, no speeches, no begging. Okay, these are all fairly straightforward. Sad dog.
No, it's showtime.
This is pre-showtime.
Yeah, no, I know.
But you have no carrying on, no blocking, no shenanigans. I love this little devil here. Shenanigans. What is he doing? It looks like he's grabbing onto the side of a bus to me. No scrounging. No photographs. That is something that has changed since the 60s. You are allowed to take photographs in the subway. What you are not allowed to do is take photographs in the subway with a tripod, because that impedes people's movement. No throwing. So know the law, free book at the change booth. I have not seen this book. I don't think we have one in our collection. I hope that the book is also an Oppy piece. So I'm always on the lookout for it. I love these little guys. And there was also a car cart version of this campaign that had them side by side with different no-nos. But also, you know, just a great example of her economy of line, especially with this no shenanigans devil. I want to paint it on my wall. No shenanigans. And no carrying on. It's like, that's the closest to Showtime, I think, out of all of these. And then towards the very end of her time at the Subway Sun, because she did work for the Authority until 1968, 1969. So these are at the very tail end of her time there. Oh, I do want to scroll back for a second because at the bottom, you can see this awesome TA logo. This is my favorite transit logo from our system. And that's how we date things too. That's how we know that this is from 1962 to 1968, because those were the years that this particular logo was in use. A secret archival trick for those of you who are wondering. And that's how we know that this is from 1968, not only because it has a date on it in the catalog record and for sure, but this dual M logo which I'm going to circle here, move millions, that was introduced in 1968 as when the MTA became the MTA. So here we are again, using the subway as a way to encourage people to apply for jobs in transit and giving you instructions on who to write to, who to call, where to go. And the last slide for tonight is another one of these. Courtesy is contagious. Let's start an epidemic. That is a slogan that Oppy used over the course of many, many years in this campaign in several iterations. Mr. Courtesy is one of the many campaigns that the Transit Authority and the Board of Transportation before them used to sort of like a customer feedback, where if you liked your bus driver, that was your regular guy. If a conductor was extra helpful to you, if the token booth clerk told you how to get somewhere faster than you imagined, you were encouraged to tell the Transit Authority who they were. So this was one of them, Mr. Courtesy. Later on, the bus drivers had the Big Wheel program. So this is also a continuum of the type of advertisements that that were house ads for the Transit Authority and the Board of Transportation.
Wait, were there actual winners, and did they put their photographs up?
I believe so. Yes. I know that for the Big Wheel campaign that happened a couple of years after this, we have a lot of those. Mr. Courtesy, I can't recall off the top of my head ever seeing them, but I believe that it was produced. I can't remember what the other campaigns were of this, but we do have examples. We do have examples of different, like, this is so and so. He's your token booth clerk, you know, and that still continues to this day. If you look at any subway station today, there's always a picture of the station manager, and it's got their picture on it, and
Yeah.
you know, so this was another function of the Subway Sun, was to kind of help humanize the transit system and point out to people that, yes, you're riding around in a big mechanical subway car, but there are people who maintain it, people who operate it, people who clean it, and people who pay for it, which is you. So and I think that's another reason why Oppy's work is super special, because her work humanized the system even more than just the words of, you know, hey, here are the people that make your subway run. You know, she showed them, albeit in that simplified, you know, anonymous face way, but it was something that everybody could relate to. And with that,
what happened after Oppy stopped doing these?
After Oppy no longer did the Subway Sun, the Subway Sun continued after a fashion, with more along the lines of things like this, where it was just straight ahead textual information, and then it kind of disappeared and was replaced with different kinds of ad campaigns, almost always courtesy campaigns. So back in 2014, they started the Good Person, Bad Person campaign. I called it Goofus and Gallant, but there's the red guy and the green guy, the Courtesy Counts campaign. So there's always been some kind of courtesy campaign in the subway. It's just that Oppy's was unique in that they are cartoons in the subway. There's lots of art in the subway now because of Arts for Transit. They have the car card program and the poster program. But as far as like a cartoony type of campaign, it's not so much. It's more like a simplified figurative campaign, like Courtesy Counts, like the mask campaign that we have now, which is the smiley face people who are very, iconography. That's, smiley iconography that is non-specific. It's, you can tell that they're either male or female, and that's just about it. So who knows? Maybe at some point, I know that every year when it's beach season, the Rockaway and the Coney Island Oppy ads get re-shown on the kiosks inside the stations because the Transit Authority loves them, and so do we. but I would love for Oppy to have a renaissance at some point. It's one of the things that I'm trying very hard to make happen by telling people like you guys tonight about her. Maybe if people ask for more Oppy, maybe she will show up in the subway again.
Well, our chat is full of people who've been asking for more Oppy. We've got many t-shirt and magnet requests. Now, Lorna asked, how old was Oppy when she stopped working for the subway?
You know, I am not 100% sure. Hold on. I have to scroll back and see when she died. Because
she died when she was 55 in 1913.
She
wait, hold it. No, never mind.
No, she died
misleading.
She died in 93.
Yeah,
she was born in 1913. So she stopped working in like 68, 69. So she was not very old. She just didn't want to do it anymore. That was really what it came down to. And I think perhaps I'm not sure, the powers that be maybe felt that she was a little old-fashioned, that people in the 60s didn't want, the finger wagged in their face about being courteous, or maybe she just didn't want to change her messaging. That it could have been any number of things. I certainly visually these campaigns after Oppy were nowhere near as fun to look at. I love the art cards that we have. I love our courtesy campaigns, but again, not Oppy.
Someone asked Jodi why she gave herself the nickname Oppy. I know it's based on Opdyke, but
yeah, she felt it was gender neutral, that it was very purposeful, that she wanted a friendlier version of Opdyke, and that she wanted it to hide the fact that she was female, because she felt that if people knew at the outset that this was a woman who was telling them to behave, that people might add subtext to it, like that she was being school marmy or something like that, which is pretty clever on her part. I might not have even thought of that, to hide myself. But she was pretty savvy. She started doing this when she was 17. That was when she met Fred. And, he was very encouraging to her. And, she was a talented lady. So I'm glad that she was ours and that I get to talk about her and curate exhibits where I could use her work to make points. And, everybody loves Oppy. Oppy and Eticat are the two.
I love Eticat.
Everyone loves Eticat.
Somebody asked, did she do any ads showcasing the L's?
I believe that the posters that she made were used on both the elevateds and the subways. But I can't recall off the top of my head any specific elevated ones, but I'm sure there are, because there's such a variety of material in our collection. It was really hard for me to pick the ones for this presentation and to keep it on time, because there's so much of it. I could talk about her for hours. And Angelina has heard me talk about her for hours at a time. There's an embarrassment of riches in her material.
2 subway questions. Yes. When were wood turnstiles replaced by metal?
Actually, that's a really great question that doesn't have a definitive answer, because there were metal turnstiles in the subway system as far back as 1904. In fact, metal turnstiles were introduced with the elevateds. We have one on display in the museum that when we open to the public again, you can see. I nicknamed it the windmill, but it's basically a bunch of metal tubes that are in the shape of those 4 paddles. Wood was introduced because that was more sturdy. And then they changed back to metal paddles sometime in the 30s, when they started making electric turnstiles. I believe that's the timeline. That's another exhibit that I did so long ago that I have not committed to memory all of that stuff. But actually, I'm going to open the chat too so I can see.
Yeah. somebody's asking about watching this later, and Salvador will put a link to our Vimeo page in the chat where it will be uploaded by tomorrow if you want to rewatch any of this. Another question is, did the Second Avenue L go over the Third Avenue L, as somebody seems to recall?
That is a question that I wish I could answer off the top of my head, but alas, I cannot. I am not sure. I know that they shared trackage in several parts, which is why the Second Avenue L was able to be built so fast, because the Third Avenue L there was a lot of shared trackage in Lower Manhattan and in Mid Manhattan. So it could have. It's one of those things where I should know. I should be able to tell you that, and I just can't. But I bet there's people in the chat who are transit museum people who will be able to answer that. I know that everything terminated in South Ferry, as Mr. Parnes says. That's like the origin point for all of the elevateds, and some of them did share trackage, but yeah.
Now, another question that Amy has is, did Oppy do other commercial or otherwise art after she stopped doing the subway ads?
She did it while she was doing the subway ads. Oppy also did ad campaigns for like Western Electric and General Electric. If anyone out there recalls Ready Kilowatt, she drew the Ready Kilowatt comics that were in the newspapers for about a dozen years. She did promotional posters for Western Electric. She did greeting cards. The Subway Sun was not her only paycheck. So her work turns up in a lot of places. And because it's so distinctive that even though Ready Kilowatt existed before she started to draw him, I guess Ready Kilowatt is a him. I'm assuming it's a him. He was an established trademark, and she took it over. And even though she drew it like it was supposed to be drawn according to, the Kilowatt Bible, it was still her, she created her own characters besides her comic strip, The Young Idea. She did some work for like the Atomic Power Commission and created a character for them called Open Atom. We have some of that work in our collection as well. She was an artist in her own right too. Somebody's asking in the chat. We have some of her artwork. She did a lot of watercolors, but there's relatively fewer pieces of that I am aware of. It's not like she doesn't strike me as the type of person who was like Arthur Weindorf, who worked for the Transit Authority and is much, much better known as a painter. But he worked at the Transit Authority and made maps for us and did, station renderings and things like that. But he's better known as a fine artist. So maybe there is a trove of Oppy paintings somewhere that are the most mind-blowing paintings ever. I hope there are. I haven't seen them.
I hope they are too. Well, thank you everybody for coming this evening. I had a great time as always with you, Jodi. It's a pleasure to speak with you, and I can't wait to do another in-person event with you one day at the Transit Museum.
Yeah, me too. This was almost as good as being there.
Right. It was.
Almost.
All right. So everybody check out both the Transit Museum and Poster House do talks online all the time. And come see us in person when you can.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Bye.